All right. Not only is it a great weekend to remember fallen soldiers and all of those who've gone on, but it's the beginning of summer, isn't it? It's the official start of summer, and we love summer. Don't you like summer? What kinds of things do you get to do in summer that you can't do at any other time? Just shout them out to me. We had some good responses last service. Paint the deck. There you go. Hey, I've got a deck you can paint. Come on over. Anybody else? Fishing, bike riding. What? Gardening. I hear you. That's what we're going to talk about today. What else? Sit on the porch and drink what now? Coffee. Okay. Okay, coffee, iced tea, lemonade. You like to put strawberries in your lemonade? Or yesterday I saw on Facebook somebody makes grape lemonade. That sounds good. Well, summertime's a great time. There's a lot of things we can do, especially if we're fair weather people. You know, we could get out and bike and sit on the front porch in the winter, but it'd get a little uncomfortable, wouldn't it? And we had a hard winter. Didn't we have a hard winter? I mean, there's plants that just really took it hard, that they're just not coming back. And, I think that's because we had a long, prolonged cold winter. So I hope global warming doesn't affect us next year like it did this year. But summertime is here, and this is the official start. Kanawha County is out of school. Putnam County, they're going to just keep them the rest of the summer and go right into next year. How about that? But you guys will get out soon in Putnam County. And there's a lot of things we can do. A lot of people are already traveling and a lot of things going on. And I hope you'll get involved in what you can. Your small groups will be meeting and doing lots of things together, not just here at the building, but, off in the community and doing other things. And, just kind of get out there and do some stuff this summer. Well, I'm going to turn to Ecclesiastes 3 because I think this has something to say about where we are right now. All right, so if you have a Bible, Ecclesiastes 3 is our text. And this is a great text of the Bible. This is one of those texts that is memorable. And a lot of people will borrow this text and read it at different occasions. And some of them aren't even Christians. Some of them, they don't even believe in God, but they love this text because it's it comes from deep down within the writer, whose name was Solomon. Solomon was known as the wisest man who ever lived. He was the son of David, and he asked God for wisdom, and God gave it to him. And so a lot of what Solomon writes here in Ecclesiastes or in Proverbs or the Song of Solomon is just some of it's just like, oh yeah, right, I knew that. And some of it's very deep, and you have to think about it, and it really touches you in a place way down deep in your soul. And that's the way this chapter is, Ecclesiastes 3. I'm only going to focus on the first two verses and then maybe one more later. But there's a lot in here, and I think you need to wrestle with it, the whole bit of it. But I just want to read the first two verses. The Bible says there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. There's a time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. Now, do you know what that time is? The time between planting and uprooting, because that's where I want to zero in here this morning. The time between planting and uprooting. Now, when Solomon wrote this, the people quickly understood a lot of these references because they were agricultural references. They were gardening references. And most of the history of man has been an agricultural history. They claimed that before we settled down and started growing our own food, that we were wanderers and that we just, we migrated. And perhaps that's the way it was. We migrated following the wild game, and when it went south, we went south. And when it went back north, we went north. And a lot of nomadic or, move around kind of people in the history of humanity. But really when it got interesting was when people started settling down. Now, right in the first book of the Bible, there's a garden. It's the Garden of Eden. And here's what's interesting about gardens. We could actually do an entire series on gardens because the world begins with a garden, and guess what? The world will end in a garden for those of us who know Christ as our Savior. So there's gardens all in between. And so just out of curiosity, how many of you like to garden? How many of you like to grow your own garden? Oh, this is great. This is great. And man, it's great therapy, isn't it? Barney Fife would say it's therapeutic, and it's really good for you. How many of you just as soon get in your car and drive down to Kroger or Walmart and go to the produce line as to get your fingernails dirty and garden, and fight everything there? How many of you are like that? And there's no shame in that. Yeah. And, thank God we live in an age where you can do that. And you can actually depend on other people to garden for you. I've often heard it said, fellas, that you should never plant a garden bigger than your wife can take care of. So just remember that. Well, all of history really is an agricultural history, and it's all through the Bible. In fact, you can turn to a lot of places in the Bible and read about agriculture. For instance, we started there in the garden, and we'll go back to that in a minute, the Garden of Eden. But the Song of Solomon, Solomon wrote this, a time to plant and a time to uproot, but he also wrote the Song of Solomon, and it's really about a garden, and it's about lovers running around in the garden. And it's kind of, can I say the word erotic in this service? I didn't use it last service, so, if you don't want to hear that word, come to the first service. But it's kind of an erotic book, really. And, it's a book we don't want our 8th grade boys to really find. We'd rather them land in Leviticus than the Song of Solomon, because it just gives them ideas and all sorts of stuff. So, and there's lots of agricultural references in the rest of the Bible. All through the Old Testament, the people were planting, and they were at the end of the season, they were uprooting, and they would bring their gifts and their offerings to the temple. They were tithe it or give 10% of it to the priest to take care of them, because they didn't garden; they were priesting, and the other people gardened. One of the greatest references is John 15. John 15 is a chapter, starts out by Jesus saying, look, it's about a garden. My Father's the gardener, I am the vine, and you are the what? The branches. And it reminds us that you and I cannot live. We cannot begin to live unless we stay attached to the vine, which is Jesus. And the Father is the gardener. And as I said, even at the end of the book there's a garden, the garden of paradise, where we will once again find ourselves with the tree of life and the river of life and all sorts of great things. So listen, if you don't like to garden, you need to at least accept the fact that it's going to end that way, and you're going to be in the garden one day. Hopefully, you'd rather be there than the other place, right? So maybe it's like bush gardens, okay? Everybody been to bush gardens? And, somebody else is already taking care of it, and it's like there's not a weed, and everything's perfectly shaped, and maybe that's the kind of garden that's going to be in the Garden of Eden. But it was way back in the book of Genesis where things got tough for us. Now, my parents and their parents and all the people down in Mercer County, where I'm from, most of them all grow gardens. And, they all, my dad has always had a big garden, and he's a multi-site gardener, okay? He's got a little garden here, and then there's the gardens over here, and then, and there's multiple gardens that you can work in if you want to. And I've always gardened in my whole life. And so when I moved up here, I can still remember we lived out Rocky Step Road on Ranch Lake Estates, our first home up here. And by nature, the springtime came, and I started planting some beans. So we had this little terrace, these plateaus, there were plateaus there, and so I planted some beans in there. And I was proud when the beans started coming up. I was like, yeah, anybody can do this. The beans are up. And then, so I'm telling my mother on the phone, hey, the beans are up. Here, are your beans up? It's kind of a gardener thing, like, how big are your beans? You got tomatoes yet? Somebody told me they had tomatoes on the vine already. And then I can remember calling back proud one evening saying, hey, guess what? My beans are starting to run. How many of you know what that means when beans are starting to run? How many of you don't have a clue what that means? You don't know what it means when beans are starting to run? Okay, well, you can live the rest of your life and not know that. But anyway, the beans are starting to run, which means they're getting ready to go to the vine. And so I remember calling my mom and bragging to her about the beans starting to run already. And so the next morning I went out there, and it looked like somebody had taken a pair of scissors and just cut off all the tops of my beans. How many of you know what happened? Well, I think it was a deer. I've hated deer ever since, unless it's on my plate. And they're bad. If you live out Blue Lick where I live, or Putnam County, it is deer thick out there. I wish some of y'all would get a big brush guard on your truck and drive up and down the road 4 or 5 times and swerve over in people's yards if you have to, thin those things out. But, so I stopped gardening. I couldn't beat the deer. So this year, for the first time in I don't know how many years, we have a garden, don't we, honey? My wife and I are out there like pioneers putting up a fence, It's plastic fence, but hey, they didn't make them when I was a kid. And so we got a little garden, and things are starting to shoot up, and it makes you so proud. And so I'm a gardener again, and it really is therapeutic. And I think y'all going to have the benefits of me being a gardener. I think there's going to be some wisdom come from my messages, and I'll be more relaxed. The staff will love me now because I'll be like, hey, I've been out in the garden. It's okay. So you should try it sometime because it is really scriptural to garden. Now, but it got tough back in Genesis chapter 3 when Adam and Eve kind of messed up. And here's what happened to us. Here's why we have to struggle today. When Adam sinned, God said this. He said, because you listened to your wife. Now, guys, just parenthetically here, you can't use this verse for any other thing, all right? This is to Adam. Because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you'll eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground. Since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. So you see what's going on there is now we're going to have to work for it, aren't we? So what I want to talk about today is, this is where we are. We're in a spiritual time. I'm not talking about your age. I'm talking about where you are spiritually. Now, we're in a between series here. We've done some things this month that we haven't really done. We've dedicated babies. We had a baby dedication service. We had Mother's Day. Last week was graduate recognition. And today is Memorial Day weekend. Lots of people are out and traveling. And so next week we start a new sermon series. And so I wanted to do something kind of in between here today. And I thought, well, I've got my hands in the soil here a lot lately. I just want to take Solomon's words here and planting and plucking up and apply it to our lives today. And that's where we are. We're in the season between planting and plucking up. You see, in the spring, when the sun gets up and the fear of frost goes away and the ground warms up a little bit, we till up the soil and we plant. And then there'll come a day, not too many months from now, that we'll get all we got out of it. It'll be all finished. It'll be tired. We'll be tired, but we'll be enjoying the fruit of our labor, and it'll be time to clean up the garden, and we'll just pluck it up and we'll throw it into the burn pile. But the time in between planting and plucking is called summertime. And I'm not talking just about a time of the year as much as I'm talking about the spiritual time of your life. And I realize that some of you are still dead in winter, that you're still dead in winter, that you haven't had the word planted in you. And I realize some of you are just kind of like new Christians, you're new believers, and the plants are sprouting up, but you're really trying to find out what it takes to water them and to grow them, and this thing is all new to you. And I know some of you are on the other end of that spectrum where you are just sitting back and you're enjoying the fruit of your labor, and you're watching your grown children make wise choices and follow after the Lord. And you're just reaping some of the benefit of your work from your garden, so to speak. But the majority of you are right there in summertime. And I think there's some things that I could tell you today between the planting and the plucking up that are going to help you, because that's where you are, most of you. Now, if you're not there, I'm saying if you're just sprouting, I want you to get there. And if you're already past that, don't go back there, because here's what I want to tell you. I want to talk to you today about how to have a great summer. All right? And the first thing we need to do is we need to give it our all. Give it your all. You see, this is the time of the year where you have maximum, and time of your life where there is maximum opportunity to produce. That's where you are right now. You understand it now. You understand this is what I've got to do. Following Jesus, getting this stuff done. This is what I'm made for. This is my purpose in life, and I just got to get to it. The Apostle Paul shared Colossians chapter 1, my favorite verse. It's really my ministry verse. It's the verse for me that defines and motivates me in my ministry as a preacher of the gospel. And he says, talking about Jesus, he says, He is the one we proclaim, admonishing and teaching everyone with all wisdom, so that we may present everyone fully mature in Christ. And listen to this verse. He says, to this end, that is to present people mature in Christ, I strenuously contend with all the energy that Christ so powerfully works in me. In other words, what Paul was saying there was that, look, guys, I'm not leaving anything to chance. I'm not leaving anything on the field. I'm giving it my all. He says, I'm just pouring into it. I've wasted a lot of time in my life, I think he could say. There's been a lot of moments that I regret now. And, chasing down Christians, hunting them down, putting them in prison, watching their execution. And that's all behind me now. He said in Philippians 3, I press on. And I'm putting everything into it. Listen, don't be afraid to work hard. Don't have the mentality that somebody else is going to work and you're going to benefit from it. What made this country strong and what made young men mostly and women step up and toe the line and put the uniform on and cross the ocean and stand between a bullet and democracy and freedom and the rest of the world was this idea that if I don't do it, who will? If I don't step forward, how can I expect anybody else to step forward? You see, I'm afraid in this culture, in this country that we live in today, we have such a climate and a culture of entitlement that we think somebody else is going to work and we're going to get the benefit. Now, that might be true in a lot of cases. You might be the recipient of a great legacy. Or your parents or grandparents or somebody else like the founders of this church may have done the harder work. And now we benefit from that. But I want to tell you something. There's harder work yet to do. And if you ever think that you're where you ought to be, that you can stop and kind of rest and hit that comfort button or that retirement button, you need to take a look at it again because there's work yet to do. I love the song we sing sometimes, greater things. Greater things are yet to come. You see, this is the maximum opportunity time for you if you're in the summertime of your soul. Don't be afraid to roll up the sleeves and get your hands into the dirt and get busy serving the Lord. Now, understand me and don't misunderstand me that you're not working for your salvation. I mean, you couldn't. You could pile up a stack of good deeds and good works from here to the first cloud or the third cloud up there, and it still wouldn't be enough for you to earn a spot in heaven. But the Bible says in Ephesians 2, and this is not up there, it says, look, we are saved by grace through faith for what? Good works. We're saved for good works. I'm afraid the entitlement culture has crept into the church, and there are a lot of well-meaning Christian people who think somebody else is going to do the job, who think somebody else should do that, and somebody else should step up to do that. But I'm just here to really to be happy, to be pleased. And there are a lot of spiritual infants in the church. Unfortunately, there are people who've been in the church for a long time. I'm not talking about age here as far as spiritually, but physically, some people have been in the church a long time, and they are older folks, but they're still babies in the faith. There's still somehow this mentality that, hey, isn't this about me? This has got to please me. This has got to be for me. And they're sucking on the bottle still. I'm telling you, it's time to get on the meat. Speaking of cooking out, who likes to cook out? Ooh, this is great. What time? Anybody? You put meat on the grill, man. And you put some veggies too, but it's no good unless you put some good meat on there. That's what you need. You got to get ready to get in there and to give it your all. Well, I've been so proud of our Gateway on the Go group. I was talking to Steve Parsons first service, and And some of you have stepped up and you're serving. You're cleaning brush and you're painting and you're serving coffee and donuts at 6 a.m. at the homeless shelter, and you're over here at the kitchen and Christ's kitchen and you're working. And I want to tell you, Gateway on the go is Gateway on the go. It's not Gateway on the sit, or the stay. And that's not just for a select group of people who said, I want to be in the Gateway on the Go group. It's for every Christian, isn't it? We got to give it our all. This is the time to do that. It's time right now. And don't be afraid to sweat. We like to sweat. Sweat is good for you. It's awesome to get a big old sweat worked up and you're just dripping. Take your shirt off, fellas, and then go up to your wife with sweat dripping and just give her a big old bear hug. Yeah, she'll like that, right? But that's good. It's good to sweat. I'm afraid we have, some of us, the mentality of generations ago where people paid other people to keep them from sweating. I want to tell you, this is your time. Don't squander the opportunities to work hard. Nobody else is going to do this for you. Nobody else is going to hand this to you. And I'm not going to take it from somebody and give it to you. I want you to get in there, and I want you to work hard. I want you to work hard. I want you to be able to stand one day with everything, every fiber of your being exhausted and sweating, and I want you to be able to say, that was good. It was hard. It was tough, but it was good. It's like Jeff Ranson. Sometimes he'll go for a little run, maybe 20 miles or so, just a short little trip down to Charleston and back. And he'll come back sometimes and he'll be standing there and sweat just rolling off him like he just got out of the shower. I'm like, Jeff, get out of my office. That's a good feeling, though. And secretly I'm saying, man, I wish I could sweat like that. And then I think, well, I could if I go do that. Listen, it's the time to work hard. The second thing I think you need to do to have a good summer is to pull the weeds. Pull the weeds. Now, when I was a kid, I told you my parents, they raised a garden, and my dad, oftentimes to learn the value of hard work and to instill this in his sons, he would send us out to the garden. And it seemed like I always got the job of weeding the onions. I hate to weed anything. How many of you hate to weed? Oh, man, wouldn't it be great if you could just plant things and not have to worry about it? You could just walk away and go back and reap the harvest. But you can't, because here's what happens. Other things in the soil start growing. And my dad would tell me, he would say, okay, if you weed that row of onions, you can go do what you want to do. And I'd get up there and I'd just be pulling them in. Sometimes I'd pull an onion out and I'd look and I'd put it back down in there and try to plant it again. Dad would say, well, the onions are dying out there. And he would tell me, he'd say, son, you work harder to get out of work than you do just to work. Well, that's, the mentality of a kid, isn't it? But weeding has always been the least favorite activity of mine. Sometimes you got to get a tiller out. And how many of you know what a tiller is? Yeah, most people know what a tiller is, but if you don't, it's this little machine somebody invented because they got tired of using the hoe, and it got these little, what they call them, tines, and it just spins, and it'll just crunch up and dig up everything. If you plant your rows far enough apart, it'll do the weeding for you. And, when I first moved up here, I had a tiller, and I took it down to Mercer County, and it's still sitting there. I told my dad not too long ago, I said, Dad, I got a garden this year. I need my tiller. He said, there it is. I said, well, will it run? He said, I don't know. I had it running about 4 or 5 years ago. He said, you can take it home if you want. It needs new tires. I said, man, I can't take that thing home. So he said, well, no bigger than the garden you got. You could just use your hoe. So I'm going to be out there probably hoeing up my garden. But some weeds you can't get with a hoe, can you? Some weeds you got to get down, and if you get too close to the plant with the tiller or the hoe, it'll kill the plant. So some weeds you got to get down on your knees and pull them up. You know what a spiritual weed is, don't you? It's that stuff in your life that keeps popping up. It keeps growing up in your life. And it's bad. But you're watching it. And you're seeing good things, but you're also seeing bad things. You know, for some of you, it's some kind of secret. Maybe a secret sin. And it's got some roots. And it's a big stalk. And you're watching it grow and you're trying to hide it. And that's a weed. And I want to tell you something about the weeds in your life. One day they'll catch up with you. And they will choke out the good stuff in your life. They will. For instance, guys, if that weed is a sexual sin, something, and it's growing and you're hiding it, and it's a weed, it's got a stalk, and it's starting to get bigger and bigger, and it'll choke out your relationship with your wife. It'll just choke it out. It will. You can't have the good and the bad growing together, because the bad will, without your work, will overcome the good. Maybe it's your language. Maybe it's language in your life. Maybe every now and then you let a few colorful words fly, and you were angry, or you hurt yourself or something like that, and you just let them fly, and before you know it, they get easier and easier to fly. And I always say if it's not in there, it won't come out, but it's coming out. That's a weed growing in you. It's a weed growing in your heart. The Apostle Paul says, no coarse language. And you're thinking, oh, it's just a little word. It's not a big deal. Just the other day, I was talking to our foster daughter, Katie, and she likes to listen to music, and she was listening to this song. She said, oh, you got to listen to this song. I said, okay. So I listened to a little bit of it, and I said, what are the words to that? And she said, I'm not sure, but I think they're saying this, this, and this. I said, really? I said, because, there's no Christian music. It's all Christian lyrics. You can put any kind of music, but it's all about the lyrics, okay? You know what your kids are listening to? Are there weeds growing in their life? And so I asked her, I said, is this giving honor to God? Does it glorify Christ? Does it give him praise? Well, no, it's not a bad song. He's not a bad person. Answer the question. Is it giving God the glory? And I like a few good old country songs every now and then, but ultimately I understand that if it's not giving God honor and glory, it's just a weed. It's really just a weed that will kind of overpower the good things in my life. Listen, you got to pull those weeds. If you don't pull the weeds, you have a life full, a spiritual garden full of weeds, and you will not be able to see the good things. And it's not just a weekly thing. When the ground really warms up and it really starts growing, how often do you think you have to weed your garden? Maybe every day or every other day. You got to pay attention to it. It's hard work, but I want to tell you, it's work you'll be glad for. Don't be afraid to do the hard work of rolling up your sleeves and being a spouse that says, look, this is not easy, but I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to do the hard work here of honoring God in our relationship. Maybe it's the hard work of being a parent, and you're pulling weeds out, but you're saying, look, I'm not afraid to be this parent that's engaged with my kids, and not just with their activities, but with their character. And so you're pulling weeds and working hard. Listen to what Paul said in Ephesians 4:31. He said, get rid of, in other words, weed out the bitterness and the rage and the anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Jesus had a half-brother initially who didn't believe in him, and then he did believe in him, and he wrote this. He said, get rid of or weed out all moral filth. That's what it is. We could lump a lot of things in that, couldn't we? All moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted. There's another agricultural term there. Planted in you, which can save you. Let's pull those weeds, all right? Whatever it is, bad habit, bad language, secret sin, maybe it's alcohol or some kind of drug or something that is starting to take root in your life, and you know where it's going, but it just feels good, it's easy, and that's the way weeds are, folks. You don't have to water weeds. You know, you don't have to fertilize weeds. They'll grow up anyway. And that's the way it is with you. Just like this is easy. It feels good. Listen, you got to get rid of it. You got to pull it out. This is summertime. You got to work hard. You got to get this out in order to get to where you want to get to at the end of the season. Well, the last thing I think we need to do is we need to enjoy the time. We need to enjoy the time. What I mean by this is, look, there's times in your life where you just like to, push through and get them over with. There's a lot of stress this time of year, because of cookouts and theme parks and vacations, and a lot of people are just stressed out over that. And there's a lot of happiness over this time of year because of cookouts and theme parks and vacations. And usually the people that aren't happy are the ones paying for all that stuff. And the ones that are like just enjoying it. This can be a stressful time, or it can be a productive time for you. Don't try to rush through it. There's times when you'd like to just get through it and get it behind you. It's like stuff going on in your life. It's like hard times in your life. Like you're walking through a mud puddle or something, and you just want to get through the mud. But the way God is that when God has something to teach you, sometimes He will take you and He'll just drag you through the mud like you would a kid maybe. And then He'll set you up on the other side and He'll look at you and He'll say, okay, we're going to do this again. He'll just drag you through the mud again. Because it takes time to learn these things. And there's times when you'd like to slow it down. I got in my vehicle yesterday, and I can't remember now. I couldn't even remember first service, but I opened something up that I hadn't opened up in a long time. I don't know what it was. And a picture fell out, just a little bitty picture. And it fell on the seat beside me. It's crazy how this happened. It didn't fall on the floor. It didn't fall face down. It fell on the seat beside me and was staring at me. And it was just this little picture of a little, maybe a 6 or 8 month old little girl. And I'm pretty sure, I'll have to ask my wife about this, but I'm pretty sure it was my oldest daughter, Jordan. And her picture, I can't remember now where it fell out of, but it fell down and just staring at me. And I said, God, why did you do that? Because in about 3 weeks, she's going to be getting married. And aren't there times when you just like to say, let's just stop right here and let's just enjoy this. Let's just savor this. Aren't there times when you like to say, oh, this is so good, I don't want this to ever end? Yeah, as a parent, there's times like that. That picture and 1,000 others in her life that'll be flashing before me, God will say, on her wedding day. But guess what? I can't stop her wedding any more than I could stop the time. I maybe could stop the wedding, but I really don't want to. Because I'm looking at my pocketbook too, let's be honest, Maybe he can start paying for some of this. But there's times we like to stop and just savor it because it's that good. It's just that good. And if you're in that situation now and your kids are little or you're at a point in your relationship or in your life where, things are good. I'm not saying they're easy. I'm not saying you don't have to work for it, but they're good. The country we live in, the time we have, listen, don't rush it away. Just enjoy it. Enjoy it. And savor it. Because I want to tell you, it won't be long, your little kids will be walking down the aisle and you'll be saying, what in the world happened to this time? It was so sad yesterday to hear about this little brown kid, 15 years old, from St. Albans. 15 years old, who was playing basketball yesterday morning with his friends. Saturday night, he was at a bonfire, end of the school party bonfire, and there's a picture of him and all his classmates, or some of them, and he's standing in the back with his hand up like that. Young, 15-year-old, good-looking, good-shaped kid. who was playing basketball and said, "I'm not feeling good," and died of a heart attack yesterday morning. His grandfather and father run the barbershop over here and used to cut my hair. 15 years old, and his time was up. Scott Davidson came up to me after the first service, and he said, "I want to show you this text message." And he had a text message on his phone, and he was talking to a friend of his from Kings River, which I think is where the boy went to church. And his friend, Michael Isbell, said, he said, "Yeah, I just found out that this kid does go to our church. And 2 weeks ago, out of nowhere, he responded to the invitation of Christ and gave his life to the Lord and was baptized just 2 weeks ago. Nobody knows why or what motivated that. But yesterday, his time was up." And you may be here, and you might be 15 or younger or 25 or 35 or 45. And you might think, "Oh, I've got time. I've got time." Do you? Do you have time? You see, I know a lot of you are going through some stuff right now that you're like, "Gosh, God, why? Why are you doing this? Why can't I get through this? Why me? Why now?" You know what God says? He says, "Hey, look, I'm in charge of your life from its beginning to its end. And I'm accomplishing, if you'll let me, I'll accomplish my purpose in your life. I'll make good things out of the bad." My grandmother used to say this. She used to say, "Time and tide wait for no man." Now, some people attribute that to Geoffrey Chaucer, but I didn't know him. My grandmother, as far as I'm concerned, said that. And she said that and 1,000 other things a lot. Think about that. Give that some thought. That ought to be a proverb in Scripture. Time and tide wait for no man. I love what Ecclesiastes, the writer, says at the end of the chapter, down in verse 11. But in verse 1, remember? Go ahead down to that next one. In verse 1, he says, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. That was verse 1. In verse 11, he says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end." And I think about the Browns who are looking at their son's 15 years of life and wondering, "God, what did you do? What is going on here?" And I'm thinking about your life and the stuff that's going on now. You might be saying, "God, why me? Why now? What possibly could come out of this?" I remember standing in front of the congregation several years ago. It's been over 10 years now, over in the other building, and I openly wept in front of you. I just couldn't control it. It wasn't just a weeping over somebody that had happened to somebody, something that happened to somebody else. It was happening to me. And I was saying, "God, why? Why would you take me away from my young family right now and send me to a foreign country to serve in uniform? Why would you take me away from my church? Things were going so well. How could you possibly do this?" And I just stood there and wept because I couldn't see the beginning or the end. And looking back on that, do you know that our church in that year that I was deployed, that first deployment, our church grew by 100 people. 100 people were coming to this church in September of the year. When I came back on my 2-week deployment, 100 more people were coming here. And they were saying, "Pastor Dave, who?" I said, hey, man, I'm the senior pastor here. Get out of here. No, but you know what? Some of you came during that time, perhaps. And I couldn't see. I'm not saying that was good or bad. I'm just saying what God is doing in our life and in the lives of our family and in the lives of our church and our country. We cannot see and understand, but we have to be patient and let him work his things. Let him work his goodness in us. You see, he can make something good of your life. I love that old song we used to sing. I want to invite you to sing it through with me a couple times here. Remember this one? If you know it. Something beautiful, something good. All my confusion, he understood. All I had to offer him was brokenness and strife, but he made something beautiful of my life. Stand up with me. Something beautiful. That's what God can do in your life. Something good. All my confusion, he understood. All I had to offer him was brokenness and strife, but he made something so beautiful of my life. Hey, if you're here today and there's a decision in your life, maybe you want to start a relationship with him. Maybe you want to say, hey, I'm a believer, but I want to seal the deal today and I want to be baptized. Maybe it's just putting down roots in this church. Maybe it's just prayer for a struggle you have today. This is an important time. It's a response time. And we're calling you, God is calling you to answer and let him do something beautiful out of your life. So you come and meet me up front here as Steve leads us in this song.